is transphobia a meaningful term? And tell me a little bit about what's going on with J.K. Rowling and India Willoughby in the same sort of answer.
Okay, so transphobia has two popular meanings, and this is why we so often see the gender critical feminists and the trans activists at cross purposes with each other. So one understanding of transphobia is not to accept the gender identity of somebody who identifies as trans. And that is the one that the trans activists work on. So when they say here is more evidence of Rowling's transphobia, what she is doing is quite clearly having the gender critical position that sex is a biological category. So in that sense, the trans activist, the definition of transphobia maps on to the gender critical feminists' definition of gender critical. So that they always will see it as transphobic. The more sort of mainstream understanding of transphobia is to have a prejudice against trans people and to want to discriminate against them in ways that it is not acceptable to discriminate against them. So fire them, for example, as from their job as a librarian, not sort of recognise that they're a man and not sort of give them access to women's sports, but a real kind of discrimination that you are trans, I have a hostility towards you, denigrate you, discriminate against you, have prejudice against you. So we have a real transphobia, which is when you see someone just sort of saying that this person is disgusting, we shouldn't tolerate this person, they shouldn't be allowed to dress like that, we shouldn't employ them anywhere, they're probably perverts. This then, you can see how that maps on to a similar attitude that you get against gay people. And a real kind of like what we would call homophobia, where you just have this intense prejudice against people who are attracted to people with the same sex, then that's on a similar level. And I think liberals and ethical people of all kinds can really say, no, we do not discriminate against people because they identify as trans. So that is a meaningful term. I know some trans people who are liberal who don't use the term transphobia. They will use anti-trans prejudice or simply hostility and aversion to trans people, so as not to confuse those two definitions. It's very much like Islamophobia, where a critique of the religion of Islam gets conflated with prejudice bordering on racism against Muslim people. So that's why transphobia is often not useful.
So it's a difference between there's like the old school transphobia, which I grew up with, which was this idea of like, oh, those trans people, they're icky and I don't like them and I don't want them part of anything. And then the new form that some trans activists are taking on of, oh, you don't want us in women's sports and that kind of thing. I suppose the conflation with homosexuality, I guess one difference is that some people would say homosexuality is sort of built on empirical evidence. You can study, somebody's attraction to other people. There's no reason to lie about that or to be wrong about that. If you're attracted and you're with those people. Whereas some people would say the trans thing is sort of built on sand. Do we have enough evidence that there is anything called trans? Do we know that is that a thing?
I think that there are two questions there, which does gender identity really exist, of course, and that would come down to a question of people who say that they have an inner sense of themselves as the other sex to which their bodies suggest, are they telling the truth? Do they really think like that? Is it a pervasive feeling? I think it's the case that some of them that they do. I mean, I think there's also quite clearly a case for a sort of social contagion, young people particularly taking this on as a medium through which to explore their developing sense of self. So that is certainly a thing. But there have been transsexuals for a very long time. And do some of them really have this feeling? I don't think we could rule it out. I think it would be unusual if all of them were lying. And so in that sense, the attraction to the same sex and this inner feeling of the femaleness or however, whatever that is, I don't understand what that is. But I think we can believe people when they say, I feel this way.
Yes.
And I think that we should. But then there's also the question of whether choice is actually an ethical thing. So I would argue, for example, that if we were to discover that homosexuality is not innate and that it was something that people chose to do as a lifestyle, it would still be a perfectly valid lifestyle. It's not an ethical argument for or against homosexuality to say that it is innate. So that makes it a totally different issue. If people wanted to make their presentation more feminine or masculine and it wasn't connected to anything innate, that I think would also be quite acceptable. Some people feminists in particular, may take exception to a sort of ultra feminine, female, sort of almost cartoonish presentation of femininity. Face. Yes. And I can certainly understand why they would feel that way. But these are a whole sort of lot of complicated issues around it, but homosexuality and trans identity really aren't the same kind of thing. And I think a lot of the people who the LGB Alliance and things say sexuality, gender identity, why is the T there? They do have a point, because they are different things. The only way they're connected is that social conservatives hate all of them.
And I suppose they're just they diverge from what we expect of people, perhaps. I still feel, though, with regards to okay, I agree with you. If someone chooses something, that doesn't make it wrong. Someone could, if that were possible, choose to be gay, great. Choose to be straight, great. But choosing to be a woman when you're a man am I missing? Because I just don't. I think you can't, though. It's a nice idea, and I like that Bertrand Russell quote of what is it? Do you know the one I mean of do what is. Go for what is true or factual, not for what you think would be good for society if it were true. So I think it'd be great if you could become a woman. I would love to do that and see what it's like for a little bit of time. It'd be fun. But you can't. So isn't it up to the rest of us to go, it's a nice idea, and maybe trans people have been around a long time, as you say, but maybe that's a delusion, and we need to tell people that.
I think you can certainly say that whether or not you believe that trans women are women, I don't. I think it's quite clear that trans women are biologically male. So this distinction between biological sex and gender identity, it often gets conflated and confused with people, gender critical feminists saying, you cannot change sex. Now that's quite clearly true, but on the trans side as well, there is also a knowledge of biological reality existing. They very well know the difference between a trans woman and a cis woman, as they would put it, and that difference is biological sex. So if somebody says that they are a trans woman, they are already saying, I have a gender identity which is different to my biological sex. Now, in discourse, this gets very much confused and conflated with people just saying, I am a woman, I am just as much a woman as you, when what they're actually saying is, my gender identity as a woman should be respected as much as your biological sex. And gender critical feminists are saying, well, no, it shouldn't. Biological sex is demonstrably real. I don't know what this gender identity thing is, but I don't believe it, and I think it's causing harm. So this is the conflict between them. Now, whether we should say to people who identify as trans, you are wrong and you shouldn't do that, and you should try to accept your biological sex and be comfortable in it, that's a moral argument, and it certainly can be made. And when we're talking about young people, for example, I would argue that it certainly is the right thing to do, everything you can to make them feel more at home in the body they have, help them feel that way, than affirm a sense of themselves that they have at that time. But when we come to adults, I think really once someone has made a decision to do this, then all we can say really is, okay, you are still biologically male though, so you do need to stay out of single-sex spaces and sports, and you do have to accept that other people will not accept you as a woman. They will not use the language that you want, and that you don't have the right to make them do so.
You're very nuanced. Can you say something very controversial so I can put it in the trailer?
We should ban coffee.
Or ban coughing. I can't stop coughing all the time. It's been months now. I'm probably dying. So okay, then we've got, which I like, this idea of, if as long as you're aware you can't actually be a woman, some people don't realize that or whatever, you can act and do as you please. But on the other side, we're also able in a free society to criticize that and say, hang on, I don't like this. And I suppose where I would criticize it is that it seems to be on a progressive side. That's where we're getting this kind of thing. And it seems very conservative or reactionary to me, this idea of, okay, I'm a woman. Well, what does that mean then? And maybe you can help me understand Judith Butler, because no one does, but we had to study her at university. And she seemed to be saying, when I was studying at university, this is 12 years ago, gender is a construct. So there's no such thing as male or feminine, really. Blue and pink, of course, was the other way around back in the day. And if you were to raise a girl as a boy and a boy as a girl, blah, 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 they would take on those traits. Now, I don't think that's entirely true, but that's what she posits. Now, that doesn't seem to work for me. So why then do they have to why must one cut the genitals off or change the genitals to fit in with? I guess what I'm saying to you is, do you know what I mean when I say it seems conservative now? Like, I'm a woman. Well, what is that? And it seems to be long hair and nails and things, which is insulting.
Yeah, that is a common criticism, that you cannot describe what it means to feel like a woman without using stereotypes that feminists have been very critical of. Of course, there is also the fact of stereotype accuracy. So there really are traits that are more commonly found among women and traits that are more commonly found among men. Well, we don't know precisely what people mean when they say, I feel like a woman. You can certainly take issue with that and say there are lots of different ways that women feel, and I don't think that's a coherent argument. And I also think that you're tying womanhood more closely to these stereotypes that we've been trying to overcome. So yes, absolutely, you can criticize that.
But still, in a liberal society, allow it to happen, providing it doesn't impinge upon the freedoms of others, which you've said, sports, changing rooms, prisons. Are those the three big ones?
Yes, and there's shelters, and then there are, of course, other issues around sort of medical advice that's going out and becoming increasingly confusing, referring to women as things like cervix havers. We already know that a large percentage of the population cannot actually name the parts of their reproductive systems, and we have people who have English as a second language. Really, if you have English, a basic level of English, you're going to know the word woman. You may not know the word cervix, so that is a problem. And sort of also law reporting, crime reporting. If we are getting reports of an increasing number of female rapists and violent attackers, then that is going to skew crime statistics. It's going to skew the information that criminologists need, and the information that the public are getting about the state of reality.
What do you think, say, the BBC or whoever it is that's reporting when it is a murderer or a sex attacker or whatever it is, and it is a trans person? How should they identify them?
I think a lot of the gender critical feminists want them to just say very clearly, this is a trans identified man. He is male. I think different outlets can have their own editorial policy, but it is very important in the first line that they use some phrasing that makes it clear that of the sex of the individual, whether it's Sally Jones, who was born David and transitioned, has a female identity. But however you do it, make it very clear.
Yeah. Do you get the impression sometimes, we have to speculate, that some of the newspapers are trolling us? I certainly feel that way, because I think I'm not talking about the BBC necessarily, but sometimes you get it from the Daily Mail where they won't mention it's a trans person, I think, because they know they're going to get a lot of comments from people who get riled up saying, that's not a man or a woman.
I quite possibly. I think sometimes that when you're looking through and the way they go about it, I get a sense with some of them, which is, oh God, I'm going to have to use she pronouns now because this is the rule, but I really don't want to do that. And then on the other side, you have people kind of burying the lead in chapter 5. That transitioned at the age of 32 or something, and that's so. I do think you see some bias there, and you obviously see playing to the audience.
What's been going on with J.K. Rowling and India Willoughby?
Yes, J.K. Rowling told Willoughby that what was the phrasing? A misogynist who cosplayed women in the way she saw women as a sort of was it performative or shallow, and I can't remember the 3 words she used now, but essentially she was saying India Willoughby was taking on this cartoonish, sexualized, frivolous attitude of women, and she thought that was because of misogynistic attitudes that Willoughby actually had, and she does have them. And here we go, I'm using the pronouns she for India Willoughby now, which people will be annoyed about, because
I'm hearing the anger from people listening already.
Yeah, that's because it's just an absolutely terrible person. So we know of India that she has expressed views that we should put barbed wire down the middle of the channel to sink boats of people trying to come to the country.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh, so India's a bit right wing.
She has been in the. I think there is. I think she may have changed her views to more fit alongside the woke at this point, but certainly she was very much in favour of Nigel Farage, of Donald Trump. Her words were, we need to go down the Trump route, and thank God for Nigel Farage. So this is quite a clear allegiance to a sort of populist right.
So you've got the populist right, India Willoughby, against J.K. Rowling, who I've always seen as, we're talking socially, I don't know what their economic views are, but socially left. This is a feminist who pronounced proudly that Dumbledore was gay. I'm a big Harry Potter fan. And always seemed to be giving to charities and being very sort of socially left, I think. So that's what's going on. But then the funny thing is that the woke side is with India, who's on the right. I know I'm being very reductive here, but is that what's going on?
Yeah, this is how it's falling out now. We have J.K. Rowling, who has been very critical of Farage and Trump and the treatment of people crossing the channel, and so she takes a very opposite position to India in that regard. And then we, as well, we have India having been very insulting about the appearances of lesbians. She accused Kathleen Stock and a couple of other women who favour a more masculine appearance of having essentially transitioned into being men. And
which flies in the face of, that's why the Judith Butlers of the 80s, that flies in the face of that stuff, but maybe aligns with the Judith Butler of today, who, by the way, seems to be an advocate of doing the worst possible things to women in resistance with Palestine and Israel.
Yes. So this is the stance. But we can really say that India Willoughby has expressed homophobic views, disparaging views. She's compared women on their attractiveness. She defined women by their attractiveness. It is not remotely unreasonable for even the most liberal, moderate feminist to say that India Willoughby's views are repugnant and insulting to women. So when we had this situation in which J.K. Rowling referred to India as a man and said, I see no lady here. This is a man cosplaying his perception of women, which is frankly misogynistic. Then we had the reaction that this was transphobic. And I have argued to that this is only transphobic by the definition of transphobia, which is synonymous with gender critical. And she always has been. She has always held that women are a biological sex category. People brought up her Rowling's earlier commitment that if there is prejudice, discrimination against trans people, she would march with them.
Yeah.
And people are now claiming that she's contradicted herself by calling India names and saying how unethical she is and how misogynistic she is, and while also referring to her as a man. But it seems quite clear to me that she's criticising India Willoughby. She's not criticising trans people as a whole. She's not saying you are shallow, frivolous, sort of exploitative, but whatever. But what the words were for essentially exhibitionist. That was what she said. Not saying that all trans people are this. She's saying that India Willoughby is this. There is no evidence in J.K. Rowling's speech that she has an aversion and a prejudice against trans people. She does not think trans women are men. Yeah. And she thinks India Willoughby is morally abhorrent. These do not add up together to a prejudice against trans people.
Did you see some of the reactions in the newspapers and things? There was some from, I think, Metro that seemed like a satire to me, but I think it was actually just what, and it was basically, I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically like, woman opens her big yob again. Was it yob gob? A big gob. Woman opens big gob and has a go at poor trans woman or something like that. And it was just like, how has it gotten to a point then? Is it not insane? And maybe that's my bias, but I think I'd like to think you and I have a similar view on this. Maybe it's not too dissimilar to J.K. Rowling's. I don't know. We wouldn't be welcome to speak at certain places. We are not welcome to speak at certain places. We've both been cancelled from being able to speak at places. Have you as well in times been sort of told you can't? Yeah, that's happening to us. It's obviously happened to J.K. Rowling in a big way. Yet India Willoughby, this person who's come out with these, you might agree, people listening might agree with her views, but they are known as quite right-wing and quite controversial views, is welcomed onto, first dates that he or she was on. That's what I'm going with, by the way, he or she, because I just don't know what, it's God, I can't. Welcomed on Big Brother, was it, I think, or Celebrity Big Brother, or one of these things. Welcomed everywhere, paraded. How have we gotten into this twisted, distorted world?
I think because people are thinking so collectively, and India Willoughby is a trans-identified person who is being strongly criticised by a gender-critical feminist. Therefore, he or she must be in this category of people that we should protect, this beleaguered minority, even though India has views of right-wing sort of populist views, which are, as you said, are within the mainstream, and many people do have them, but they are not compatible with the woke views that support the real sort of queer theory-based trans activism. They don't go together at all, and it does seem that people are willing to overlook these sort of transgressions into right wing and borderline racist. At one point, she did accuse a black woman, which she put those two words together to suggest black woman was something different to woman, and had only had her success because of diversity policies, which I think we can say is pretty racist. So I have seen people criticise her for that, but and say she does not represent trans people, that they don't fit well. And it is, as you say, there is a complete lack of consistency from that aspect, that element of the left, who really should see J.K. Rowling with her whole range of views and the things she has put money into as very much on their side, and the way they translate her actions. When she founded a shelter for abused women, and the first reaction from this contingent was that it was hateful and transphobic because it was for women defined as biological females. Can we not get past that for a minute to recognise that women who have now been battered, abused, have nowhere to go, are afraid to leave and protect themselves, have somewhere to go?
Yeah. Well, Ricky Gervais, it's a different level, I think, but Ricky Gervais does a lot for like animal charities and things. That's the thing he cares about. And now that's weaponized against him. He's sort of portrayed by the woke as this sort of weird animal lover who hates humans. My experience with him is that I've been lucky enough to speak to him a few times, like one of the loveliest guys you can ever meet. He's so caring about all different kinds of people. He just doesn't stand with the woke on that particular subject, and a few other subjects, I suppose.